All right, for more on that, we're joined by the former Deputy Chairperson of the Electoral Commission of South Africa, Terry Tselane, to share some insight. Good to have you, sir, and thank you very much for your time. There are some within the opposition who look at the statistics, 26 million registered voters in the country, 3.7 of them are young people, only 3.7. Disaster of a statistic, really, if you look at it. And they are saying that this is because of a failure of the IEC to come up with a vibrant youth voter registration campaign, putting the blame at the doorstep of the IEC for failing to encourage eligible young voters to exercise their constitutional right. How would you read that kind of perspective?
Well, I think a criticism like that is really misplaced, because the political parties have got a responsibility to mobilize voters to go and register and also to participate in the electoral processes. Even though we understand that the IEC also has got a responsibility in terms of ensuring that through voter education, it's able to incite and excite people to participate in the electoral processes. But the civil society as well as political parties also have got a major responsibility in terms of civic education, vote education, as well as ensuring mobilization of people in general to be able to participate in the process. So if we have a situation where young people are not participating in the electoral processes, political parties also have got a responsibility to do self-introspection and try to find out what's wrong with their messaging, what's wrong with their strategies that make young people not really to participate in the electoral processes.
Yeah, so some look at, for example, especially the young new parties that are coming up, looking at the leadership of the IEC. They're saying, well, we've got the old guard there. There are no new ideas. There's no vibrancy, for example, in how you're engaging young people around voter education along the campaign trail. And this is why young people are choosing to stay away. What innovation have you seen, being introduced, particularly that speaks to young people around the voting process?
Well, there are quite a number of few that have been introduced. Firstly, it is the issue of voter registration. You recall that in the past, voter registration was supposed to be in person, and any person who wanted to participate in that process therefore had to go to a registration station and register. But that aspect has since been done away with. Now people can actually now register wherever they are. So this basically is a facility available largely to young people, because young people are the ones with technological know-how who can actually be able to use the devices they have to be able to register wherever they are in the electoral processes. But you will also notice that for quite some time now, the Electoral Commission has been focusing on using social media to try to get young people to participate in the process. So in order to be able to participate in the process, the Commission, together with the political parties, have got to find young people in platforms where they are located. And social media happens to be one such platform. And I think the Commission, together with some of the political parties, have actually been using that platform or mechanism very effectively to try to get young people to participate in the electoral processes.
Now, of course, you remember we had this conversation, you and I think when we were going to voting in the last local government elections, around the introduction of technology at the voting stations themselves. So would you say a party like Action SA Youth, who are saying that the IEC is a body that is become full of old leaders who are out of touch with the reality of voter pattern and trends in terms of how people are voting in the world today using technology, would be an untrue statement, or maybe even an unfair assessment?
Well, I think the Electoral Commission is a little bit slow in terms of embracing electronic voting mechanism. I remember when I was still part of the commission, we basically conducted a study where we were trying to get the country as a whole to begin to move into electronic voting. And when you look at quite a number of the universities now, we have just conducted the elections of the SRC at Fort Hare University, as well as Venda University. And both were using electronic voting mechanisms. So students were quite happy to be voting using their cell phones wherever they were. And then the voter turnout happens to be extremely high as a result of that. And I think the time has really come for the Electoral Commission to begin to speed up that particular process to ensure that, the electronic voting mechanism is introduced, because that's the only way that we can actually be able to get the majority of people participating in the electoral process. We've got quite a number of people who are supposed to be participating in the process, but due to the fact that they've got to go and stand in long queues, that number diminishes when it comes to the day of the elections, because people do not want to stand in long queues. Yeah. So I think the time has really come for the Electoral Commission to review its processes and to make sure that they speed up this arrangement. Almost all the universities now, or tertiary institutions, are now using electronic voting for SRC elections. Now, if we can have areas such as Venda that are supposed to be in areas where connectivity is difficult, using electronic mechanism for their SRC elections, then it should be possible for the whole country to begin to embrace electronic voting mechanism in the electoral processes.
Yeah. Let's move a little bit on the youth-oriented focus and talk about other issues that now are being raised by, for example, the UDM, are being raised by the ATM. In your time there, even in your time post being at the IEC, have you ever come across evidence of vote tampering or result manipulation as being raised by some of the parties, attributing that to some of the service providers who are linked to the ANC?
Well, there have been actually incidents of an attempt to manipulate the electoral processes, and then we may be aware that the Commission, the Commission, in fact, did at some stage in KwaZulu-Natal ensure the arrest of one of the officials who attempted to tamper with the electoral outcome by basically stuffing the ballot papers with pre-marked, the ballot boxes with pre-marked ballot papers. And that particular person was sentenced, I think, to about a period of 10 years. So from time to time, yes, you do find at the voting station level an attempt by some of the officials to try to manipulate the process. But fortunately, the mechanisms are there in place to make sure that those are identified quite quickly. The presence of the party agents and observers play a very important role in terms of uncovering those kind of things and then bringing them to the attention of the Commission so that they're addressed before they can actually have a serious impact on the electoral process. So it is the responsibility of the Commission, of course, but it is also the responsibility of the party agents as well as observers to make sure that they are at the voting station, they know, they see what is actually going on, and they are able to prevent any irregularities that arises at the voting station level.
One of the things that all parties seemingly agree with the chairperson of the IEC on is that these elections are going to be the most challenging for the country, especially with the introduction of independent candidates, but also other parties are saying for the first time it's not really a foregone conclusion as to who is going to be the victor in these particular elections. Do you see the introduction of independent candidates becoming a headache, kind of like the introduction of the electronic voting system, which became a real big issue, and people arriving at this voting station, going to another voting station, and the system not connected, unable to pick them up, and so on and so forth, and created a whole lot of headache and havoc?
Well, there are two aspects here. Firstly, it is the challenge that this will bring to the Electoral Commission in terms of putting systems in place to be able to accommodate all these other processes. And what it's making things will be more difficult is the fact that the Constitutional Court has not as yet issued its judgment in relation to the matters that have been raised related to the new amendment of the Electoral Act. So the kind of the mechanism and measures that the IEC will put in place will largely be dependent on the outcome of that court case. So that's the challenge that the Electoral Commission already has going forward in terms of the preparations for the elections. And the second aspect is obviously for the voters. Voters will also have, a challenge in terms of now being able to choose the kind of the people that they want to choose. And I think there is sometimes a misunderstanding. People seem to think that when you are having the independents participating in the process, then it means that it is possible for an independent to become the president or to be elected the president. But the system is structured in such a manner that, particularly in terms of Section 86 of the Constitution, that it is only the National Assembly that will actually elect from amongst itself a person who will become the president. And then obviously in that case, the political parties do have a sway in terms of who gets actually elected as the president of the country. But not only that, the fact that if you look at what has actually been happening, since 2016, a trend has developed where now you're seeing that increasingly you no longer have one dominant political party. And the fact that you no longer have one dominant political party raises possibilities of a very fierce electoral battle, but also possibilities that you can actually now start having coalitions at national as well as a provincial level. Yeah. So we'll see how these things pan out. And it will be a challenge, obviously, for the country, given what has actually been happening at municipal level with coalitions. If you have now a coalition at national level and in provinces, it's going to be a new challenge that the country is going to have to deal with.
Tselane, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much, as always, for coming on. Former Deputy Chairperson of the Electoral Commission of South Africa, Terry Tselane.